So if you remember, we stopped exactly on this slide in our last lecture. So these were like provision of public goods and the requirement of the government today. Now, this is one part which we can skip. In the role of the government, we have seen how externalities play a role in resource allocation because the efficiency conditions will be lost because there is a difference between private and social costs. So the role of the government becomes very crucial. Now this part is important. This is something what we call incomplete market. Now we have seen that in case of a public good, uh, the cost of providing a good might be more than the aggregate willingness to pay. And hence, the public good might not be provided at all if it is left to the market. But private markets in themselves can fail, even if the cost of providing a private good is less than the willingness to pay for that. The example of such a market that I can give is insurance and loans. We have we do see that when we talk about capital market, when we talk about insurance market, these markets are not perfect. Take for example, if you do not have a proper collateral, it is very difficult to get a loan. Similarly, in the insurance market also, as if you remember, I let me remember the name who talked about it. Most probably, if I remember, that was Anand or Ayush, either of them, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, that I talked about it like pooling menu, separating menu, those stuff. So in insurance market also, the market, take for example the case of theft insurance in India is still very nascent. It's not that theft is uncommon. Theft is very common. It is not that people are not willing to go for theft insurance. People are also willing, but somehow the market is income. Sorry. Now, there are broadly three reasons for incomplete market. The first one is related to the relentless and continuous innovations through which a particular economy functions. There are so many innovations that have cropped up when we talk about banking. But when it comes to insurance, such innovations are missing. So basically, if we need to have, when we look at the economy as a whole, we need to have all the wheels rotating at the same pace. But in certain sectors, innovations are far higher than compared to other sectors. And that leads predominantly to a particular set of goods or services away from the other goods and services where innovations are setting. There's you require certain set of innovations, certain set of designs with which you can make this insurance work very properly. But those lack in those particular pockets of the economy leads to incomplete market. So take for example, when you go to the bank to open a particular account, to do a particular transaction, 10 years back, we had to wait in a long queue. Now you can do it from the comfort of your home. You don't have to do anything. Very recently, certain insurances have come up where these type of facilities are there. Take for example, I myself purchase car insurance from Policy Bazaar. So I don't have to go anywhere. From the comfort of my home, I can do those things. But not necessarily in case of loans. You just cannot have a loan without going or visiting personally or doing paperwork, legal paperwork with the lender or the lending institution. Now, there is one more reason for this incomplete market, and that one reason are transaction costs. Take, for example, again, you have somehow taken a car loan, and this is very, very frequent in India. You have taken a car loan. You are supposed to pay a certain amount of monthly installment. The rule is if you fail to pay one EMI, there will be a penalty, which will be added along with this particular EMI when you actually pay for this EMI. Now, what happens if you just stop paying? Now, what does the contract says regarding that loan? It should be very simple that a particular bank or financial institution has given you a loan to purchase a car, and till the loan is uh, not repaid, the car remains mortgaged to that particular financial institution. You have to pay EMI till a certain length of time. Suppose you stop paying, then the financial institution has all the right to come and seize the car and auction it off to recover the losses of the financial institution. So that's the law. Very simple law. Very straightforward law. But the problem is it's very, very costly to enforce this contract. You stop paying, and suppose you had given an address which was a rented one, and you just do not pick up your phones and everything, change your SIM card, you just vanish. So the bank will keep on searching for one problem. Second, you go and have a minor accident, give the car to a particular service station, and do nothing after that. So the company people or the finance people will come, will say, my car is there in that workshop. The workshop people will say, the car is here, but we cannot release the workshop until the bills are repaid. So look, there can be hundred, umpteen number of problems that can come just with this very small car loan. Think about other loans. You have taken a loan for a business, and after a few days you declare bankrupt. And there are particularly loan sharks, I will say, who flee the country. And we have seen that in recent days for Indian economy for three, four big cases. It's very costly, very, very costly to effectively enforce the contract. And that is why most of the time, a number of, I will give you the case very shortly, loans are rejected. And look, there was a lender who had the money to lend. There was actually a needy borrower who wanted to borrow the money. And the interest rate for such loan transaction was well within the willingness to pay of the borrower. But still, because of completely other reasons, this particular transaction will not occur. Similar is the case of protection to patents. You have a patent on something, but someone else reverse engineers and makes a uh, almost a uh, generic copy of that, and it's very difficult for you to stop. Now come the final and the most important reason: risk and asymmetric information. What is risk? Can anyone tell me? When we talk about risk, what is exactly? We talk about it, no? A
Uh,
lot of this.
the potential for loss an investment carries.
Mm, not clear, Ayush. Can you rephrase it, or anyone else?
So difference between expected outcome and actual outcome.
Expected outcome and realized outcome. Okay, that's one way of looking into it. Yes, Sagar. Anyone else? Actually, I'm looking for a particular term which is very commonly used in economics. Anyone else would like to give a try?
The uncertainty in
Yes, yes, yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah. Uncertainty. Look, Sagar, what you have said is a correct. Ayush, you have also given something very close to it. Basically, for any transaction, when you go for the transaction, we know I will be paying this much, I'll get that much, right? What if there are certain uncertainty? Now, in the strict sense, depending on now here, I will be completely uh, careful while choosing these words, but depending on the particular case in economics, there are three terminologies which we tend to use uh, mm, like as substitutes, but they have very, very specific meaning in specific subdisciplines or cases. And these three words are risk, uncertainty, volatility. And as you might understand, apparently these three terms look quite close to each other, but in real life, it is not. So, risk and uncertainty is like due to certain, I'll try to put it in a very different way so that it becomes more clear. So when I'm talking about a lender and a borrower, it's basically nothing but a strategic interdependence between two economic entities. And in a very, very simple fashion, you can think that the lender has two options to lend or not lend, and the borrower has two options to repay and not to repay. So if the lender does not lend, chooses that option, neither the borrower gets anything nor the lender gets anything. So basically, they are neither better off nor worse off. So we can think of a zero payoff to both of them. Now, the other option is the lender lends. With that, the borrower invests. Now, this investment can come up with a probabilistic distribution in the sense that after, say, a particular stipulated period of time, you might get 100% return with a probability 50%. You might get 30% return with a 40% probability, and you might have a negative 50% return with 10% probability. So the expected payoff we can calculate using the expected utility function sort of measure, which we call the von Neumann-Morgenstern utility function, expected utility. So basically, it's nothing. Suppose my with a 50% probability, it's 100 plus 40%, it's 30 plus 10% negative 50. So basically, your expected return will be uh, zero point 0.5 into 100 plus zero point 0.4 into 30 plus zero point 0.1 into minus 2, right? That will be the expected percentage return. But the realized return will be either of the three cases. So uncertainty in the outcome leads to the riskiness of that investment. And suppose you have invested the money in a stock market, and on a daily basis, the stock price of the particular equity that you have purchased goes ups and down. You expected it to go up, but it went down. Next day, you thought it will go down further, but it went up. So there are fluctuations. And that is exactly what we call the volatility. So there is very thin line between the three words that we use: risk, uncertainty, volatility. But all has, we can encompass everything in a broad word of uncertainty or non-certain outcome, or the return being stochastic in nature. Correct. So you can use all these words, but if I go to the market and on the way I have an accident, that is definitely an uncertain outcome, but not absolutely not volatility. So there are case specific cues as well. So you have to be very careful. But in general, when I talk about risk, it's basically my idea is about an uncertain outcome. So now look, remember the example I just gave you. You took a loan, invested it with different possibilities in outcome. Now the lender also knows that. And if he thinks that there is quite a high probability that the borrower's investment will fail, and in that case, the borrower will declare bankrupt and the lender will get nothing. He will lose the principal amount. Forget about the interest component. He will not provide the loan. The second thing, which is very important, is asymmetric information. What is asymmetric information? When there are different agents in the market, not all have the same set of information. Or suppose in this case I just discussed, like there is a lender, there is a borrower. Either of them has more information than the other. Or which in layman's language, common language, we call private information. So the information that I have is not available to the other players in the game. Now, asymmetric information, and as we discussed, this very high cost of enforcing contract together can absolutely rule out a market. And there is something I have written, a market for laymen. Okay. So I will just briefly give you the example of asymmetric information. But before I do that, let me ask you: have anyone told you, or does anyone know what is a market for lemons? Have you ever heard of it? Okay, no one responded means no one knows. Very good. Lemons are second-hand automobile cars, private cars, bad cars, cars with defects. So this was one of the
Yes,
seminal
sir,
papers.
I have heard.
Yes. Okay, who is that?
Sir,
Sapriyanshu.
we did a
Okay. Yes.
Yes, sir.
presentation on George Akerlof.
Ekerlo, correct.
So there was a topic, market for lemons
Yeah.
The
Which paper?
market for lemons.
presentation,
No. For which?
microeconomic one.
Microeconomics.
Microeconomics.
Two.
One.
One.
One. Okay. Very good. So look, that's the thing. So you remember, but that happened just because one group did a presentation. Good. Uh, so now this is a seminal paper by Ekerlo, and it's very simple to understand. Think about the second-hand cars market, and why lemons? Because the the paper is written by an American, and in the American market, these terms are used. So if it's a good car, it's called a peach, Peach. If it's a bad one, it's called a lemon. So now you want to purchase a second-hand car. You do not know which one is a good one, like well maintained without any issues, and which one is actually having some fault, serious fault. Because from the outside, both look the same. And as you all know, that the seller of the car, even if it's a lemon, will try to tell you or convince you that it's the peach. Now suppose, think from the seller's perspective. So there is a person whose car is again he wants to sell off, but it's actually in a good condition. Now he has a reservation price of say $3,000. So I will not sell anything below 3,000. Now there is a bad car, a lemon. The seller knows. He himself knows that the maximum he will be happy to get $1,500 for that piece of junk. But will he say that I charge $1,500? He will not, because the moment he says, "Okay, the price of the car is $1,500," the potential buyer will understand it's a lemon. So obviously that will not be sold. So he will also keep the price at $10,000, right? He will also say it's a good car. So the seller exactly knows the true value of the car. So it is an information which is only with the seller, not with the potential buyer. Now, if that happens, and suppose as a potential buyer, you understand that there will be like 50% good cars and 50% bad cars. So what will be the expected price that you can give? With 50% 3000 and 50% 1500, right? So zero point 0.5 into 3000 plus zero point 0.5 into 100 and 1500. So it will come around 2250 if I'm correct. 1500 there and 750 here, 1500, double 250. Now suppose who will sell a car at double 250? Only the owner of bad cars or lemons, because his reservation, actual reservation was 1500. But the person who had actually a good car, whose reservation price was 3000, he will not sell it at double 250. So, given this asymmetric information in the market, the lemons or the bad drives out the good or the peach. The classic example of bad driving away good. And it's very simple. Now, this asymmetric information, and I say uh, high cost of enforcing contract. So, what can be a contract in this case type of second-hand car market? It's mostly a verbal communication. It's like you take it, sir. If it gives a problem, let me know. I will take care of. I know it's a good car. But the problem is, once you have the problem, this person who has actually sold will behave. Why are you coming to me? You must have driven it in a bad way. It was very good, and when I sold it. Now there are ways of mitigating this problem as well. That's what we call signaling. So signaling is basically a particular strategy or a particular action which a seller of a good car only take, but not that of a bad car. Why? Because there is a certain cost involved. So suppose you know that it is a good car. And you say, I will not say it's a good car or a bad car. What I will say that I know it's actually a very good car. There are no problems in it. So if you want to confirm, you can take it to a particular service center, the manufacturer, the brand service center, get it checked up thoroughly. If any defect comes out, not only that you will not have to buy this car, but I will pay everything for the service or checkup cost. Or I will accompany you. If there are any problems, I will pay the entry cost. If there are none, then obviously you purchase the car. Now, the owner of a bad car just cannot give an offer like that because he knows the moment it is being taken to the service center, the problems will come up. So, asymmetric information and contracts. Sorry, actually, I'm not in a proper shape. since uh, day before yesterday night. Uh, anyway, so
So you took the second dose or first
second
dose?
dose, second.
Okay, second dose doesn't have that, shouldn't have that much
For me, it
symptom.
was exactly the reverse. First dose, I did not feel anything, and in fact, I joked that
Okay,
they might have pushed distilled water. I joked among my friends. The second dose was quite tough, quite tough. Anyway,
okay,
so
it's
now,
different for rest of us.
exactly. It's different for most of the people who are my friends and family, like my mother-in-law, all those things. Anyway, so yeah, I know. For me, it was quite different. I was completely numb. And okay, so this asymmetric information and this enforcement issue leads to non-existence of mark. Now you can understand. So if the asymmetric information remains and there is no signaling possible, enforcement is always a problem, particularly in countries like India. So the moment you enter the market of a second-hand car, you know you're buying a lemon. So good cars, good second-hand cars are not there. Okay. Now there is something else called complementary markets. This is like only one particular agent or institution cannot, uh, what I will say, uh, mm, implement the objective, cannot implement the work to attain the objective. So there has to be a number of agents come together, coordinate, and only then the market will be successfully implemented. So it is a game. I will use this word cautiously because I know that you are not exposed to game theory, but still, all of you must have some idea about strategic interaction because it's embedded. We do interact with each other strategically every day. Take, for example, uh, someone like, I'll not use the word kids because all of you are adults. But when you are kids, coming late from a friend's house, so you had to negotiate with the parents. And when you have siblings sharing the room, you interact strategically. Uh, when you go for a dinner outside along with friends, splitting the bill. So bargaining with in the market for anything you buy, so it's embedded. It's there. You do not know the theory, but the strategic interaction you exercise it on a daily basis. All of us. So if you don't want to use the word game, you can use strategic interaction. So what we say is coordination among a large number of factors. Example is a public urban regulation. What you want is to renew or completely restructure the urban space. So what are the players? First, the government. Second, all the factories in and around, all the owners of buildings like landlords, all the retailers, all other business. the transport department, the police department. Everyone has to come together to have a successful implementation of a program like that. And when there are too many players, the chance of coordination failure is very high. It's not that a particular retailer does not want the street in front of his shop to be clean and tidy and free of potholes. He wants, everyone wants. Even the factory owner wants there should be reduced pollution. And it is not that he is not willing to pay for a air cleaner or a scrubber. That's what we call say scrubber type of things or the uh, pollutant absorbents, all those things. He's willing to pay. But he knows if he does it alone, nothing will happen. If you want to implement it, you have to implement it for everyone. Otherwise, if I spend alone, it will not only be a cost on my part, but at the same time, it is not going to help anything. So everyone has to come together. And when you have too many cooks, the broth is spoiled, right? Too many cooks spoil the broth. So pure failure of coordination sort of issue, and the market does not exist because of lack of complementarity. Complementarity in markets fail because lack of coordination, and hence you have incomplete market. Now, I will spend a little more time on information because this is very important. Now, imperfect information, just putting a word like that on the slide, I think is not ethically correct. To understand what is perfect information, we need to understand certain other things. One part is asymmetric information that you understand. Another part is uncertainty. You also understand that. Apart from those two things, let me introduce one more term, simultaneity. Anyone in the lecture right now, I can see like 68 people apart from me, anyone who does not know something of a game called prisoner dilemma. Prisoner dilemma game. Please raise hand and don't hesitate. I just want to see the numbers. So only then I will explain. Ashok does not know prisoner dilemma game. Ankit does not. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. There are a lot of people who has no idea about the term. Okay, put it up. Thank you. So number of people who has no clue what is a prisoner dilemma. Two criminals are nabbed by the police. And the police can charge them with a very small thing like rash driving. That evidence the police have. The police suspects they're also part of a much more serious criminal thing. Take, for example, kidnapping, extortion sort of racket, which the police does not have evidence. So this police play a game with them, put them in two separate chambers and simultaneously give them a deal. The deal is if you confess to kidnapping, we'll make you the witness and under the witness protection program, and you'll serve a very small sentence. Because if the other person does not, we'll charge him with everything because of the evidence you are providing with us. The police tells the same thing to the other person. Now these two people, they can either confess. The moment they confess, they think the other will not confess, I will confess, become the witness, take the witness protection program, will serve as minor jail term, but the other person will go for a lifetime achievement award. But the structure of the game is the moment one confesses, the other does not. The one who confesses becomes the witness, gets this benefit. Suppose 2 years of jail. Other one who does not confess, but based on the evidence of this witness, he can be charged for 25 years of jail. Now, what happens if both of them confess together? Both of them confessing together, that means both are giving evidence against each other. Put both of them into jail for a long term. Now, there is a other option. None of them confess. Very hard not to crack. He said, look, I do not know what you are saying. You can charge me with rash driving. I accept to that. Obviously, I have evidence to that. But I have nothing to do with, I have no idea about what he does. I have nothing to do with this bigger crime. And neither I have knowledge about his involvement in this bigger crime. Now, what happens? In that case, police has nothing else to do. Charge them with a very small rash driving ticket. The problem is, if this thing happens simultaneously, both will confess. Why? Look at the incentive structure. If I do not confess, my opponent, the other person in that room confesses, then he will become a witness. I will go for 25. Okay. Now, what if I confess and he also confesses? Both will share the jail term. I do not confess, he also do not confess. But the moment I do not confess, it's better for him to confess. So it is better for me to confess. So this is what we call the best response strategy. Take for example, just think about the opponent. The opponent has two options: confess, not confess. He confesses. What is my best response? If I don't confess, I'll go for 25 years. If I confess, I go for 10 years. If he does not confess, it's better for me to confess, become the witness, because both not confessing also will be charged for the lower crime. In either case, confess to the police becomes my dominant strategy. So now look at the uncertainty in the game. I do not know what you are doing. You do not know what I am doing. But because of this strategic interdependence, both our lives are dependent on each other. The entire thing could have been solved had there been a possibility of communication between them or a sequential move. You act first, look, observing that I act second. Results could have been very different. But this simultaneously taking a decision means what we call decision taking. Simultaneous decision taking is both of us know what are the options available to each other. We also know what are the possible set of options we can take, like confess, not confess, 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 not confess, all those combinations, and the payoffs related to each set of strategies that I can take, but I cannot observe his action and then take a call. I have to act simultaneously. So I can only have a guess about what is the best possible thing he can do. But I cannot say what that he will do it for certain. Second, there is no way of foresee the final outcome when you take your decision. So no communication and complete uncertainty. Only thing I have in my information set are: one, what are my options? Two, what are your options? Three, what are the related payoffs? And everything else is a guesswork. So now, when there are simultaneity, you can understand the information set that both the players have are far from perfect. So this is asymmetric information, uncertainty, simultaneity. Now I come with a fourth and final reason. This is what we call completeness, not complete market. That's a different thing. I'm talking about information, complete information. Take, for example, uh, you have you have found very recently that organic farming has become a very lucrative option, particularly during lockdown. People have seen that the basic necessities. Dheeraj, do you want to say something? Okay. Okay. So, uh, you want to go for organic farming. Now, Uh, you have taken a bank loan and you have given a collateral as well. So the lending, borrowing, that problem is not there somehow. However, there is a probability that rainfall is insufficient and the projected or expected outcome was not achieved. Now, this can happen due to certain natural calamities, natural things, or it might happen like take for example, you are supposed to have a business deal with a Chinese firm. Both it's we are talking about some certain joint ventures or business collaboration. You have a set of strategies, they have a set of strategies, everything that they're going on finally. But however, in the meantime, Indian army and Chinese army, they took up arms in the border and everything breaks down. So neither your company nor the Chinese firm has anything to do there. So third party who's not a part of the game, they are those armies are not going to come and uh, be a part of the payoff structure of your companies or your business. But a quasi war breaks out in the front and everything gets stalled. It has a call nature. So any natural thing or any other force which is not a part of the game which is being played or the interaction which is being under observation, but an external shock which has direct bearing on the game, on the payoff, on the outcome of the interaction. So technically, within quotes, I will say, if nature moves in first, or if nature moves at a later stage, but it is not observable by at least one player, then we say this is a case of incomplete information. So, a scenario of incomplete information arises when before that, the first thing in the game, there is an external shock. Or there might be an external shock at a later stage, but such shock or such uncertainty is observable by some and not observable by some, or at least not observable by at least one. So, move external shock coupled with asymmetric if the external shock happens at a later stage, or no asymmetric information, but the external shock happens at the beginning, and we call that a situation of incomplete information. So, imperfect information can come. Let me write down. I think you can see when I am editing the slide. I are you sure? Am I sure? Like, am I correct? The moment I'm editing the slide, you can
Yes, sir.
see. Yeah. So simultaneity, asymmetry, incompleteness. So you can see when I'm talking about a market, when I'm talking about multiple agents, multiple entities involved, and when it comes to information, any of these four can lead to what we call imperfect information. A perfect information is what? Where the entire game, entire uh, interaction is observable by everyone at every stage and with no uncertainty and no external shock, no nature. Only then we will call it's a game of perfect information. However, there can still be cases where outcome is uncertain but still perfect information. But that is a very uh, for that I have to we all have to understand game theory a little bit more technically, so which is not feasible, and that's why I'm excluding that case of uncertainty and perfect. Simultaneously, obviously, asymmetry, obviously, incompleteness, obviously. Uncertainty with some exception. They lead to imperfect information. The moment I have imperfect information, I have a case of marketplace. Now think, now let's relate it to the efficiency analysis that we have done. The
So
first
can we have a 5 minute
what
break?
five. Okay, okay then. So yeah, we can have a 5 minutes break.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So shall we start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Just a moment. Yes. So now let's relate to this uh, understanding of brief understanding, very rudimentary understanding of uh, types of information and information failure to the efficiency analysis we had done before. The first thing is, if you remember, if you have information which is private, what will you do? You will try to extract as much as rent using that private information, which means, in simple words, you want to have more profit from others using the specific information that you have, which means you do not behave as a price taker, or you do not behave competitively, because you have an edge over others due to a certain set of information which you withhold with yourself. The moment you have some more information, or suppose you don't have the information, take for example when you talk about simultaneous coordination, and I said coordination failure can happen because in simultaneous moves, as you can say, just in the case of prisoner dilemma, both could have done best by not confessing. In that case, the police would be helpless but to charge them with a overspeeding ticket, nothing else. But somehow the information structure was such that they were pushed to both confess and end up in a prison for a long time. Both are worse off, but that is equilibrium. Why equilibrium? None of them has an individual incentive to back off or deviate from the action or decision or strategy they have taken. So, when it comes to perfect competition, there is something which is already underlying, but neither it is a part of initial microeconomics or uh, the HS 2001 that you have studied. There we somehow there was an implicit assumption that information is perfect. So when I talk about perfectly competitive farm, that farm knows what is the demand curve. That farm knows that there are so many players in the market and everyone is behaving identically. That farm, there is nothing in that equilibrium, in that structure that a particular farm does not know. So all information are there. So this information part, obviously, it's a part of a much more advanced microeconomic. Uh, what I will say, it's a part both uncertainty, uh, then information, games, all are part of a particular course called advanced microeconomic theory under the new curriculum. But I used to take these modules under um, advanced economic theory in the old curriculum. So I'm not going to delve deeper into these things, but I think I could make myself clear that information and competition are linked with each other. And if there is imperfect information, so whether it's a simultaneous move where people are guessing about each other, so in the edge word box, I'm guessing about your indifference card, your MRS. I do not exactly know. Or there are some external shock, which is beyond player one and player two in that edge word box. Or I have more information than you, or our payoffs are uncertain, and I cannot see it. I cannot see exactly what is my payoff. I only know with 80% probability this will happen and 20% probability that will happen. So I have an expected utility function. In all these cases, I have cases of market failure. The moment market failure creeps in, efficiency breaks down. And if efficiency breaks down, that means the two fundamental theorems of welfare economics, they fail. So information and efficiency are linked to each other directly through the channel of market failure. Now, this is a macro view. So far, we have dealt with the microeconomics. Now, market failure can also be seen from a macro perspective. All of you know what unemployment is, what inflation is. I'm sure if I ask anyone, they will be able, he or she will be able to answer. What is unemployment? What is inflation? Now, the basic view of the economy is if there is unemployment, then there is something grossly wrong about it. If all the wheels of the economy are turning smoothly, then the unemployment will be voluntary unemployment, not involuntary unemployment. What is voluntary unemployment? Let me ask you a simple question that will also brush up your memory a little bit. What is so specific about labor supply curve? When we talk about the labor market, what is unique about, and we have studied so many supply curves, commodities, everything. We have supply curves, aggregate supply curves, and so blah blah. What is unique about labor supply curve? Just think, it's there. It's there in your memory. You must have done it in macro or HS20001. Okay, let me rephrase. How does the labor supply curve look like?
So, do you mean how labor affects efficiency or something else?
No, when I'm talking about macroeconomy and I'm talking about the classical macro model, how does the labor supply curve look like?
Sir, it is backward bending.
Yes, backward. Why? This is something I think none of you.
Sir, the
Yes, yes,
income effect is greater than the substitution effect.
perfect. Technically, absolutely perfect. But Yatharth, you are from economics background, right?
Yes, sir.
Avinav, you're not.
Yes, sir.
Avinav, yes.
I'm not.
So Yatharth, you can hear Avinav. But can you explain, Avinav, why this income and substitute? This is a technical answer, completely technical answer. Absolutely correct. No issues. But Yatharth, can you explain, Avinav, in layman's term, why it should be backward bending? Will you try it?
Uh, sure, sir.
Yeah.
So if we are increasing the wage rate, the laborers will like to work more since they will be getting more benefit out of it. But if we are increasing the wage rate up to a more certain extent, then the laborers will try to reduce the work hours because they'll be getting more and like the income effect dominates substitution effect.
So can we
Okay.
say that certain level of income, the people start preferring leisure over labor, so the curve becomes backward bending.
Audrija, correct. Yatharth, correct. Absolutely. Both of you together have given the perfect answer. So basically, what happens? This uh, you will learn if I understand correctly. Uh, but no, I don't think. Uh, Maybe in macro two. Who taught macro two? Siddharth. Siddhartha.
NC Nayak sir.
Infinite. Okay. Um, have you studied micro foundation of macroeconomics? Anything? Have you heard of this?
No sir.
Good. Basically, in advanced macroeconomic theory, there is something what we call micro foundation of macroeconomics. So far, we have studied microeconomics, macroeconomics separately. But there is a very strong link between these two. And the idea is it is the individuals who make up the aggregate story. So the story starts from a very simple uh, island economy where Robinson Crusoe and Friday are stuck after a shipwreck. All of you must have heard of the story of Robinson Crusoe and Friday. Now, the question is in that economy where there are two individuals with two different preferences, how their individual preferences add up, and particularly when we add dynamicity to that, when we add savings, when we add borrowing to that. It's a two individual economy. Now look, the two things Robinson Crusoe can do is either to work or to just sit on the seashore and relax, chill out. But if he does nothing, he will not have anything to eat at the end of the day. At least he has to hunt or gather. Forget about cultivating. To survive, he at least needs to procure some fruits or hunt some uh, whatever available birds or whatever in that island to survive. So there, for every individual, there is a trade-off between work and leisure. So your utility function is no more. So what is the utility function that we have studied so far? It's a function of good one and good two, right? So utility is a function of C1, C2, consumption of good one, consumption of good. Subject to optimize the budget line. What is the budget line? P1 x1 plus P2 x2 equal to the income that I. And I have a constraint optimization. I optimize. I get the relative price or the slope of the budget line equal to the MRS. So that's my classic utility maximization issue. Now that is the direct utility function I'm dealing. What is an indirect utility function? I remove C1C, but I bring in the relative price and the income. So my utility function basically then what I'm doing the duality problem, trying to solve the duality problem. Instead of having a budget line and trying to achieve the highest possible indifference curve, here's what I'm doing. I'm fixing a utility or indifference curve and trying to find the minimum or the least expenditure that I have to do. So basically, either you go for utility maximization or expenditure minimization. Now, what is expenditure? It is contingent upon the relative prices, so P1 and P2. So I can take the relative price to capture the substitution effect between the two goods, and M, the income. So these two types of utility functions you have done. Now bring in time. So you have relative price, you have income, and also you have the labor hours that you put in. So leisure is nothing but 24 minus the working hours you have put in. Because there are 24 hours in a day. What is the maximum number of hours you can work? Now, when I'm talking about this individual, he knows that if he works more, he can eat more. So the more he hunts and gathers, he can save for tomorrow and everything. Basically, we are also adding in, with the time dimension, we are also adding in the intertemporal choice. I can hunt and gather today and eat tomorrow also. So the more I work, the more I can consume. In the literal sense, in this case, there is no money involved, right? I'm talking about Robinson Crusoe Friday. Two people stuck in a shipwreck after a shipwreck in an island. So I'm talking about the real economy. No money. Exchange can be there. Remember that Edgeworth box, the barter system. Exchange can be there. But however, we don't have any money. I'm talking about the real economy. So the consumption is literal consumption. Now, the more I work, the more I can consume. Not only that, the more I can save for the future. And that is where you get the concepts of marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save. Now the question is, the moment I have sufficient stock of say fruits and whatever, next day I might not work at all. I have. If I want to gather more, these fruits will become non-edible, inedible in future. They will they will rot. So there is no meaning of stocking more apples than I can consume today and tomorrow. So I'll stop working. And this is exactly theoretically what Audrija and Yatharth tried to. You keep on working till a particular wage rate. Now bring this back to the real life with wage rate and everything. The more you work, the more you earn. So basically, it's a lateral shift upward of your budget line. So keeping, suppose you have the substitution effect constant, that slope of the IC, the slope, the lateral shift. Suppose you have. So income consumption curve is basically a straight line with a 45-degree slope. It can happen. It's a unique case, but it can happen. What about the income part? After a certain point of time, if the wage rate keeps on going up after a threshold, you will prefer more leisure than consumption in your utility function. Because the utility function I'm talking about is a function of relative prices, income, and leisure. So this third component makes it backward. And look, for all non-economic students, you can now understand the substitution effect is nothing but the relative prices changing. If I have more income, which good I should consume over the other one? And the income effect is if I earn more, how much my consumption is going to be affected. So the moment you have this backward bending supply curve, what you understand that you have a normal demand supply curve. And if that happens for a particular market clearing wage rate, you have full employment in the economy. That is the meaning of the word full employment in macroeconomics. The market clearing number of units of labor. But does that mean there is no unemployment? Yes, there is unemployment. And that is voluntary, which means people are willing to work maybe for a higher wage rate, not at that market clearing wage rate. So for this particular wage rate, I volunteered to remain outside the employment market, outside the labor market. So when we talk about unemployment, we are basically talking about involuntary unemployment. And that comes through what we call sticky wages. And this is a classic case made by classical economists against unionization of labor. The moment you have a unionized labor, you will have a wage flow, which means wages will not come down from that level. Suppose this wage floor is over and above the market clearing wage rate. That means what will be the employment? The wage rate intersecting the demand for labor curve will give the quantity of labor. But at that wage rate, the labor supply curve, you'll find more people are willing to work, but they are not getting employed. So this is what we call involuntary unemployment. And when we are talking about it, when we are seeing there is unemployment in the economy, people are willing to work even backward bending part. I'm talking before that. If people are unwilling, there is no problem. If people are willing but not getting the job, which is involuntary unemployment, that in itself signifies something wrong in the economy. So full employment is not achieved. Now, another problem, so that is also one signal of market failure. So if there is unemployment in the economy, some markets are failing. And that is exactly where the government should identify which markets are failing, why, and how to tackle it. The second thing is inflation. And now, inflation, here also I'll talk a little bit about macro, but in which, uh, forget about non-economic students, even for the economic students, in which semester do you have international finance? There is a course international finance, right? Offered by Professor Gauri Shankar Hidema. When do we have that?
Sir, in eighth semester.
Eighth semester.
Yes, sir.
There you will learn in much more details about the mechanism I'll be talking about here. There is something what we call open economy, macroeconomics. The macroeconomics that you have done so far is about a closed economy. You have a government, you have a y equal to c plus I plus g plus nx sort of a function. That's it. But when I talk about open economy, macroeconomy, I'm basically talking about exchange rates. Exchange rates between two countries. And what is exchange rate? Take for example, it is the price of said dollar in terms of Indian rupee. So when I'm talking about, say, the today's exchange rate is 70 rupees per dollar. That means today the market mechanism has somehow decided that $1, $1 is worth 70 Indian rupees. Now, what is the price? Price of anything is determined by the demand and supply of that. So now I'm talking about the price of dollar. That means there should be a demand for dollar and there should be a supply of dollar. Without going into details, very simply, the moment you export, you earn in dollars, so that is the supply of dollars. The moment you import, you have to pay in dollar, so that is the demand for dollar. There are two more things: capital inflow, capital outflow, FDI inward, FDI outward. So when FDI comes in, suppose it comes in dollars, so that is again a supply of dollars. You invest abroad, so you invest in dollar. So you have to give rupee equivalent to RBI. RBI will give you the dollars, and basically that's the demand for dollar. So import plus capital outflow gives you the demand for dollar. Export capital inflow. These two are the broad components of supply of dollars. Fine. So you have a demand curve for dollar, supply curve of a dollar. You have the data. You get the exchange rate. Fine, no problem. The problem is, what if, as in the case of India, the Reserve Bank wants to manipulate that exchange or what we call manage that exchange rate? What will do? It will tamper with the demand and supply of dollar. So take for example, I give you a scenario and I'll try to be as specific as possible. If you have any problems, obviously you get back. So one, suppose a large FDI comes in India in the form of dollar. So the dollar supply goes up, right? If the dollar supply goes up, that means the price of dollar should come down, maybe from 70 to 60. What will happen? That means rupee has become a little more costlier than previously. If rupee becomes more costlier, then our exports goods becomes costlier because our exports are the imports of foreign countries in terms of dollar. Now, if our goods become costlier, our exports will shrink. We can have an imbalance in our trade account. To stop that, what does the RBI do? What does the RBI do? The RBI will try to take away that supply of dollars initially. So if I want to remove that supply of dollars, I want to purchase that dollar. So the excess supply of dollar will vanish. There will be no problem with the exchange rate. So I have managed the exchange rate. But in doing so, if I want to remove that excess supply of dollar, I have to buy that dollar with which I will buy with some rupee. That rupee will go into circulation. So there will be increase in money supply in the domestic market, leading to inflation. Now, to control that inflation, the Reserve Bank will issue bonds to commercial banks. Commercial banks will buy bonds and give rupee. So you take back the excess supply of rupee as well. So this is what we call open market operation. So now you can think what sort of a complex mechanism we go through. You have your trade sector, you have a domestic inflation, you have exchange rates, and you have inflation target. And most of the cases, the economy tries to rectify at, at every time point, at every point of time. So it's a rectification problem that keeps on going on until you'll not say an equilibrium is reached because there is no point equilibrium here. It's an equilibrium path. And you hover around that equilibrium path. So basically, okay, do we have these are things you have done, but let me now I'll not stop sharing now, but I need to show you something else, let me try to show you what I mean hovering about an equilibrium path. I'll use the whiteboard for a moment. Uh,
Sir, can you please share the screen of the whiteboard because it takes some time to sync with us.
okay, let me let me first get the whiteboard myself. I have not erased the whiteboard last time I have used. So I'm erasing it. So share enter screen. Okay, okay now. The moment I
Yes, sir.
share the moment I share enter screen, my whiteboard goes off. What happened? Where is my whiteboard? No, it went off. Open share screen. Whiteboard. I'll remove it. I'll do one thing. There is an easier way. Easier way is try to draw here. Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Uh, Suppose this is in the vertical axis, you have the exchange rate. What's a dollar today? And now you have a band. Uh, Suppose these are the bands within which the Reserve Bank wants to keep the dollar price. So the lower band. So the price of dollar should not go below this band. Neither it should go above this band. And in between, you have, sorry, any random movements within that. So if you look at the exchange rate, daily basis, you will find zigzags like this. And sometimes they go outside the band. Now you might ask me that where are these bands? RBI never declares the upper band or lower band. But in general, using some expectation modeling, like adaptive expectation models, you can create some upper and lower bound, which are like statistical bounds. In general, what will happen? This correction mechanism. So suppose it falls completely below, there will be an intervention through open market operation, or it goes up, there will be some intervention using uh, uh, purchase of treasury bills and selling of certain dollars from our reserve. So there are too many things which keeps on going parallelly. So these might be, or suppose forget about a band. Suppose you forget about this band. Suppose this is the expected path in which the Reserve Bank wants the dollar exchange rate, dollar rupee exchange rate to flow. Sorry. And the enter every day there will be corrections which will try to bring. So look at this point, at this trough, or at this crest, we are in a disequilibrium because this is my equilibrium path. This one. The moment I deviate from my equilibrium path, there will be intervention. And there will be minor. So these major are shocks minus a volatility. If there is a shock, there is a large difference between the expected path and the actual path. There will be intervention. But if these are small fluctuations, the market will autocorrect. And that is how the macroeconomic perspective also talks about market failure. So every day, if there is a disequilibrium, the government, in the form of Reserve Bank of India in this case, will pitch in or to try to move a corrective measure. Okay. So let me delete these things because I just wanted to show not a part of. All these things, inflation, unemployment, disequilibrium, all signals market failure, but from a macro perspective. Finally, these market failures are not mutually exclusive. The moment you have an information failure, you have a missing market. There is a strong link between missing market and externalities, and we have already studied the link between externalities and public. So this makes the role of the government even more tricky. The market failures do not come alone. Most of the time, they come in couple. So one basic problem leading to another problem. So information itself leading to one sort of market failure, and that leads to a missing market because of absence of complementarity. Because if there is a market failure there, other markets are complementary or interlinked. A market failure here generates a market failure here. And this is the reason public policy and public economics or public finance is very, very important. You have to incorporate both micro and macro perspective. Now, I will not discuss about this. I have just copied from the book. You can read the book or you can read the slide. It's a Control C, Control V. Just read this part. It's about this study. Market failure in agriculture. Just read, you will understand. So, when the market is Pareto efficient, you don't require intervention. The first welfare theory is there, but it has a problem. It does not talk about equity or distribution. So the government intervenes, brings in say public distribution system, initial allocation, initial relocation of the endowment. You have the second welfare theorem. So even in the second individual theorem, people or individuals, they might take a wrong decision. Take for example, school dropout, not wearing seat belts while driving the car. The role of the government is like that of a parent and what we call a paternalism. It tries to rectify not only the initial problem of distribution inequity, but also through certain laws and institutions. So primary education is compulsory. If you do not wear seat belts, they are being fined. Uh, this I think I have told in a previous lecture. So I'm not talking about the examples anymore. But the thing is, now there can be three views finally. One, what we call the libertarianism, which means basically laissez-faire. Leave it to the market. Another part of that is even so either the one part is the paternalism, other part is the liberalism. So you have the two extremes where there is complete handholding, the full role of the government, and the other one is a complete laissez-faire, no role of the government. So it can be a convex combination of both. And two things are very important. One is normative. What should be done? The market has become efficient, fine. Equity should be done. So how? That's the positive analysis. What should be done? Positive. What actually is being done and how it is done. So let me stop sharing. I have overshot the time. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can actually please go ahead. So we have completed the market failure part. But I think it was a little loaded. Too many things. So just uh, listen to those parts which are new to you, like information theory is new to you. That part of Reserve Bank intervention on exchange rate, that is new to you. So listen to those parts of the recording a little carefully.